Well, it gives me great pleasure now to welcome and bring on board Mr. Pawan Munjal, Vice President CII and Chairman and CEO of MotoCorp. Mr. Munjal, fantastic to connect with you. Thank you for joining us. Hope all is well and fine at your end.
Thank you very much for having me, Nikunj. All good here. I hope the same for you all.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Munjal, Indian economy has survived the COVID storm. We have revived in last 12 months. What can this budget do so that we now thrive? So from survive and revive, what can this budget do that we move to thrive?
All right. Let's start with the economy, how to take the economy to an accelerated path. I firmly believe that the government should focus on improving demand in the economy. Demand right now, as we all know, is at a very low. Having gone through these close to 2 years of the pandemic, things are really down in almost every sector. The budget should focus on prioritizing infrastructure-led CAPEX to facilitate broad-based recovery. Some of the other growth-inducing measures that the budget could consider relate to front-loading fund transfer to the states for CAPEX and a push towards affordable and rental housing. Government already has programs around housing, affordable housing. Now is the time to give it a big push. An impetus should be given to improving ease of doing business once again and reducing cost of doing business. Costs have really gone up in these recent times. We have to improve consumption demand by steps such as augmenting rural income through increased allocation on Manrega, rural infrastructure creation, etc. Focus on improving the health infrastructure and subsidized credit to SMEs and contact-intensive sectors is really, really important. We all know how people are having to spend on health, especially in the rural sectors. People didn't plan for all these expenditures on health, and their balance sheets are really, really going bad. Further, incentivize to promote exports and attracting domestic and foreign investments through a stable and predictable tax regime and continuity in policy. I stress on continuity in policy should be the hallmark of this budget. In fact, my personal belief is that the budget should be a long-term budget where we know what is coming in the next year, what is coming in the third year, and in the fifth year. There should not be breaks and quick changes in the budget, which then don't give a lot of incentive, especially to investment coming from abroad. Nikunj.
Mr. Munjal, the settings of last year budget, Mr. Munjal, were growth at any cost. But now inflation coming back, which will have an impact on purchasing power, and the rural income is already under pressure. What can be done to address that inflationary aspect? Mehengai, the most important component, which in a sense will be the yardstick for rural spending.
Let me say that the budget should aim at rejuvenating rural demand, as I said earlier. The holistic focus on the rural economy encompassing both the farm and the non-farm sectors is important to enhance this competitiveness of agriculture and boost consumption demand. There clearly is a need to step up investment in agri infrastructure, such as the cold chain, warehousing, logistics, and irrigation, which would improve rural connectivity and demand in the rural areas. Allocation could also be increased under the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana to further speed up the construction of the rural roads and improving connectivity of villages with rural roads and mandis. There already is a lot of road construction going on, but more focus on the rural sector is required. Besides, it is recommended that the Manrega allocation should be increased to rupees 1 lakh crores for the next fiscal year, considering that Manrega is a vital society safety net for rural residents and migrants impacted by the pandemic. Also, incentivizing the industries to move to rural areas and semi-urban areas would generate employment near home for the rural labor force and provide fruitful means of livelihood to those underemployed in agriculture. This would also help the labor not to migrate to big cities, large cities, but stay home or closer to home.
Good morning, Dr. Munjal. This is Nantara. So, pertinent point that you're making that we need to see more allocation for the rural economy. In fact, for the FY22 budget, we did see a decrease after 2 strong years. Dr. Munjal, with what you're saying, the question also is when at a time when we're starting to see green shoots in the CAPEX revival, something that has been missing for 10 years, where the profit pool is also looking very real. As a leading member of India Inc., are CEOs, are captains of India Inc. also willing to do their bit, like you were pointing out, and to make investments in rural India, whether it is to set up factories, manufacturing facilities, etc.? Because we've been hearing about this now for almost 2 years.
Absolutely, Nayantara. I firmly believe that India Inc. is already doing that. Look at some of us. We've gone into various rural parts of the country with our 6 plants. Gujarat is rural, Andhra is rural, Rajasthan is rural. We have gone into rural areas, and I see many of my compatriots in India Inc. doing that and going forward. I am very, very clear and very certain that all of us do have advantages by going into these areas. Many state governments are incentivizing industry to go to rural areas. And I do believe that state governments must keep on doing that and more to bring industry into rural areas. Large cities, big cities are already congested, and it's so tough to get the required infrastructures in these areas.
We've, of course, seen HUL stock boss, Mr. Mehta, also flag off a slowdown in the rural growth during the earnings report card for HUL. But Dr. Munjal, since we have the privilege of having you here on ET now, this is also a budget that can do a lot as far as going green goes, carbon credits go. As a leading member of India Inc., the largest two-wheeler manufacturer on this planet too, when it comes to mobility, do you have any expectations? Does India Inc. have any expectations when it comes to going electric?
Absolutely, for sure we do. With the economy on the road to recovery, this is the right time to focus on sustainability and climate change. And we know how focused, how keen our Prime Minister is on this very topic. He's been making statements and commitments on behalf of the nation at various fora, and also him having led ISA, then talked about the green hydrogen from on 15th of August. I believe the entire nation has to back all that up. The budget should bring out a policy framework for transitioning towards decarbonization, wherein high taxation could be considered for high carbon products and vice versa. Industry must be incentivized to transition to low carbon products. Production of renewable energy products should be rewarded. Today, there are a lot of hindrances many of the renewable energy companies are going through a tough time. To develop hydrogen as an alternative fuel, companies should be provided with investment allowances for investing in installing electrolyzers in their plants, etc., etc. And I do believe we must have a mission behind hydrogen. A central agency should be dedicated to look at a roadmap for the adoption, financing, and creation of clean technologies. For instance, the purchase of green assets and electric vehicles should be brought under priority sector lending. Again, CII has already proposed a mission on hydrogen in the country, and also I personally believe there must be a mission behind electric vehicles. We've already started moving towards electric vehicles. To speed up this entire transition, this entire change, to build the infrastructure, there has to be a focused and a concerted effort behind this.
Mr. Mujal, has enough been done in terms of PLI schemes for all major sectors? I mean, big PLI schemes have been announced, everyone's welcomed them, but is that enough?
Nikunj, I have to say this is early days. All of us are just, finding out what's going on with the PLI schemes. Stuff has already started. People have already made their own bids for various different PLI schemes. We are all learning as we go. I'm sure the scheme will get modified as we go along. Yes, we will realize, we will know more as we go along that more needs to be done to bring in investment through the PLI schemes. And I would tend to agree with your question. Has enough been done? Maybe not. We will have to do much more to incentivize much more investments to come through the PLI schemes. I know in our own sector, various different companies have already gone ahead and applied and bid for the schemes. We will know more.
Mr. Munjal, there seems to be a renewed excitement about, at least in India, that how the supply chains in the world are changing. Because of COVID, China one policy, dependence on China as a manufacturing destination. We've been talking about it. But is there evidence to get convinced that this is a long-term trend where, let's say, we can divide, just like historians, they divide the world into BC and AD, we can divide the manufacturing world into pre-COVID and post-COVID, where India would be the biggest beneficiary?
Well, I would like to see India being the biggest beneficiary. Now, we have spoken about that for at least 2 years, for India to take advantage of what is going on in the rest of the world, specific to a certain country. Unfortunately, that has not happened so far. We haven't seen investment, flowing in to India, changing course from another nation and bringing investment here. We haven't seen that happening yet. Of course, the timing also wasn't right with the pandemic, with the way things were going. But I would want to see that happening. And India does have that opportunity. We should not lose that opportunity. We must make all the best use of this opportunity, give the possible incentives and give possible means for investment to flow into India and the supply chain base come to India. India becoming the manufacturing hub, India becoming also the supply chain for the globe.
So, Dr. Munjal, and we've not seen investments come in for that, for this China Plus strategy. Can you share with us and our viewers what your thoughts on how this can be done, and if it can even be done via the budget, the union budget and the big day tomorrow?
While we're talking of the supply chain, I do want to touch upon the SME, MSME sector, which clearly is the backbone of industry, backbone of manufacturing, and one of the possible means of incentivizing this investment coming into India, supply chains moving into India. The MSME sector has been one of the most adversely affected sectors by the successive waves of coronavirus. To revive the sector, the Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme, ECLGS, should be extended beyond March 22 with additional funding support, as it will ensure credit flow to MSMEs. Second, the fund of fund scheme that has been already announced and which provides equity funding for MSMEs should also be expedited. Third, there is need to revive the credit-linked capital subsidy scheme, CLCSS, for technology upgradation, which was discontinued post 31st March 2020. The creation of fund of fund scheme for technology adoption with a focus on adoption of advanced technologies is required. Such a fund would help MSMEs in the adoption of new technologies and provide incentives such as cheap loans, tax breaks, subsidized cost of technology that will support purchase or lease of technology, etc. Also, this would further propel much needed digitization for the small industry. Now, all this clearly is going to help incentivize the investment flow into the country.
And the corollary of that, Dr. Munjal, another way of looking at it then could be that this will also maybe boost consumption, because as you said, SMSMEs are the backbone of the Indian economy, but there has still been a lot of pain since the outbreak of the pandemic.
Oh yes, as I just mentioned, MSME sector is the worst hit through the pandemic. Of course, large industries like ours have really come forward to help and support the MSME sector during these 2 years, but much more is required, much bigger support is required. While I'm talking about the MSME and the support, let me say that India Inc. as a whole, most part of the India Inc. during the pandemic has really come forward to support the government with its vaccination drive and supporting the health infrastructure. Many of us have come forward to create interim, temporary hospitals, supporting the health workers across the nation. And the vaccination drive, the way we all have driven the vaccination drive, supported the government, is definitely one of the reasons why the government also has reached the numbers that it has reached with double vaccination across the country. Of course, we will continue to keep doing this. We are still not out of it. And this support has to continue from the entire industry going forward as well.
Mr. Munjal, what is your read of the rural economy? While it is looking weak and anemic right now, some would argue that the cycle is such that it will automatically bounce back as job losses normalize, as the economy is open up, as immigrant labor they start coming back. Right now, yes, there are concerns, but that's largely because this part of the economy or this spectrum of the economy was the first one to take a hit and will be the last one to normalize.
I have to say, Nikunj, it may be a cycle, but the situation that we are in, we cannot wait for the cycle to bounce back and the rural economy to bounce back. The support that I mentioned earlier is definitely required and required now. We have to pull the rural economy out of the depth that it has gone into right now. And all that support is definitely required. The sentiment has to improve. The sentiment is at a low. The demand has to improve. So all of that has to be done.
What would you say would make India Inc. and investors happy if we see the policy making moving in that particular direction as a stated objective? what would you say that could be disappointing, or we would term that as a missed opportunity?
As I said earlier, we definitely look forward to this budget, which is a demand creating budget and boosts investments in infrastructure. On the other side, as I said, we don't want to see any additional burden, any additional taxes on industry, which again pull down the economy, while the support to the rural sector is very, very welcome, but that should not be balanced by taxing the other parts of the economy, which might pull down the economy. And most importantly, as I said earlier, I definitely want to see a long-term policy-making budget. In other words, there should not be changes, breaks in the budget, which again disincentivizes investments. We must be able to see long-term policy for the next 3, 5, 10 years.
All will be revealed tomorrow at 11 a.m. when Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will begin her budget speech. Dr. Munjal, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on ET Now. Thank you so much for your time. Continuity, stability with a long-term vision is what India Inc. wants, with, of course, the government loosening the purse strings to continue to pump prime the economy. This is an ET Now exclusive. CII Vice President and the top boss of MotoCorp a day ahead of union budget on your channel. Many thanks for tuning in.